Stop talking! Pam Bondi's voice ripped through the air like a gavel smashing down. It wasn't a request, it was a command, sharp enough to slice through the room's fragile composure. For a heartbeat, time froze. Eyes widened. The crowd held its breath. But then, instead of shouting back, instead of matching fire with fire, Jasmine Crockett turned her gaze calmly toward her interrupter. No raised voice, no theatrics, just measured composure, a reply so precise, so unshaken, it landed harder than any scream could. Her words weren't loud, but they cut like steel, controlled, deliberate, undeniable. In that moment, the polarity of power flipped. Bondi's attempt at dominance only spotlighted her own desperation. Crockett, without raising her tone, became the center of gravity in the room. Viewers watching live leaned forward, stunned. The silence after her calm response was louder than Bondi's yell. This was more than a clash of personalities. It was the sound of arrogance colliding with dignity. It was the proof that composure could be devastating, that calm could be louder than rage. And yet the true force of Crockett's reply wouldn't be measured in that chamber. It would erupt later, across millions of screens. The confrontation didn't happen in a vacuum. It unfolded against a backdrop of political theater where every word, every gesture carried weight far beyond the walls of that chamber. America was already on edge, culture wars raging, partisan divides deepening, and an audience primed for fireworks. People tuned in not just to watch a debate, but to witness a clash of identities, values, and visions of the country itself. For Pam Bondi, the stakes were personal and political. Her reputation had been built on being tough, unflinching, impossible to rattle. To her, cutting in and commanding silence wasn't just an interruption, it was an assertion of dominance, an attempt to seize control of the room and remind everyone who she believed held the authority. In her world, volume equaled power, but for Jasmine Crockett, the equation was different. Every second of that exchange carried a burden heavier than most could imagine. She wasn't just defending herself, she was carrying the weight of representation of countless voices who have been dismissed, silenced, or told they don't belong. Her response wasn't about scoring points, it was about dignity. It was about proving that presence steady, unapologetic, resolute could not be shouted down. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. One woman clinging to control through sheer force, the other embodying strength through restraint. Viewers could sense the collision building. Tension thickened in the air, hearts raced, timelines waited to explode. And then came the FOMO moment, the sense that something extraordinary was about to break loose. You could feel it like the silence before a storm. No one watching could have predicted what Crockett would unleash next, or how a single calm reply would ignite shockwaves far beyond that chamber. Pam Bondi built her career on being the immovable force in the room. As Florida's Attorney General, she stepped into the spotlight with polished charm, the smile, the poise, the well-rehearsed sound bites designed for cameras. But behind the image was a reputation carved from hard edges. She thrived on confrontation, cultivating an aura of someone who could bulldoze opposition with sheer presence. Bondi's name was tied to high-profile cases, some that won her praise, others that sparked controversy. Critics accused her of wielding power less as a tool of justice and more as a stage for dominance. Allies admired her tenacity. Opponents saw arrogance thinly veiled as confidence. And in debate settings, her strategy was unmistakable. Overwhelm, interrupt, and control the tempo before anyone else could find their rhythm. It was a tactic that often worked. Many opponents, caught off guard by the sharpness of her interjections, faltered. The volume, the authority, the sheer force of her interruptions, they carried a weight that left others scrambling to recover. To Bondi, silencing wasn't rude, it was victory. But that approach carried its own blind spot, underestimating those who wouldn't play by her script. She assumed interruptions would rattle, dominance would intimidate, and her opponents would fold. What she didn't count on was someone who wouldn't be shaken, someone who could absorb the heat and answer not with fury but with precision. And on this day in this chamber, that someone was Jasmine Crockett. Bondi had used the same playbook countless times before, loudness over logic, volume over virtue, but this time her opponent wasn't flustered. Crockett was waiting. Jasmine Crockett's story begins far from the marble halls of power, rooted in the struggles and triumphs of everyday America. Raised with an unshakable sense of service and responsibility, she carried the lessons of resilience long before she carried a title. Law school was not just an education but a calling, a way to step into rooms where voices like hers had too often been absent. She defended those who couldn't defend themselves, standing as a barrier between the vulnerable and the systems that sought to grind them down. Her rise was never smooth. Every step forward was met with doubt from those who underestimated her, not because of her abilities, but because of what she represented. A black woman with unapologetic conviction, she faced dismissal in subtle looks, condescending tones, and outright attempts to silence her. Yet instead of shrinking, she learned to sharpen her voice. she discovered that the most devastating power was not in shouting, but in speaking with clarity that could not be ignored. That lesson hardened into her trademark style: truth-telling without apology, calm under fire, dignity when others tried to drag her into chaos. For Crockett, composure wasn't passivity, it was strategy. Every pause, every measured word became a weapon more effective than any raised voice. To her supporters, she embodied their own frustrations and hopes. They saw in her the reflection of their struggles, the countless times they had been interrupted, dismissed, or told to quiet down. And when she stood her ground, she was standing for them too. So when she entered that chamber opposite Pam Bondi, Crockett carried more than her own reputation. She carried the weight of experience, of communities counting on her, of a life that had prepared her for precisely this kind of test. And when the moment came, she wielded it like a blade. The chamber became a pressure cooker. Pam Bondi leaned forward, her voice cutting sharper with each interruption. What began as a firm challenge quickly twisted into an aggressive barrage, her tone hardening, her volume climbing. She was no longer engaging in debate, she was trying to dominate it. Each time Crockett began to speak, Bondi lunged in with another sharp command, her cadence quickening, her words delivered like blows meant to disorient. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't mirror the hostility, didn't raise her voice to compete. Instead, she met each interruption with something far more unsettling: silence, a pause, a look. And when she did speak, her words flowed with precision, as though carefully carved rather than hastily thrown. Bondi's thunder crashed, but Crockett's calm refused to bend. The more Bondi escalated, the clearer the contrast became. The room could feel the imbalance. Bondi's voice rattled like a drum losing its rhythm, each outburst less commanding and more desperate. Crockett, steady and deliberate, seemed to draw strength from the very chaos swirling around her. She wasn't resisting the storm, she was letting it reveal the difference between noise and authority. Observers leaned in, sensing the dynamic shift. The clash was no longer about the points being argued. It wasn't about the policy on the table or the legalities in question. This was about something deeper. Who held control? Bondi believed control came from volume, from silencing, from refusing to yield an inch. Crockett showed another path: that control could come from composure, from refusing to be baited, from letting dignity itself do the speaking. With each attempt Bondi made to tighten her grip, it slipped further away. The optics told the story more powerfully than the words themselves. One figure flailing louder and louder, the other commanding more presence without raising her tone a single decibel. The tension became unbearable, a string pulled tighter and tighter, daring the audience to see who would snap first. And then, just when it seemed the barrage might never end, Crockett struck. Not with anger, not with noise, but with one sentence so calmly delivered, so devastatingly precise, it flipped the script entirely. Crockett waited, letting Bondi's final interruption echo into silence. Then, with her tone steady and her gaze unshaken, she delivered the reply that would rewrite the entire exchange. "Are you finished?" The words hung in the air, not shouted, not rushed, just measured. The simplicity was brutal. Bondi, mid-motion, froze for half a second. The power of the question wasn't in what it asked, but in what it revealed: that all of Bondi's shouting, all of her bluster, had been reduced to noise. The room inhaled collectively, bracing for what might follow. Crockett didn't pounce. She didn't need to. She continued, every word sharp, without needing volume. "Because I refuse to match your yelling. I'll answer when you're ready to actually listen." That line struck like a quiet thunderclap. It framed the clash in crystal clarity. One woman demanded silence through force, the other commanded respect through restraint. The chamber reacted instantly. A ripple of gasps, a few muffled chuckles, the kind that slip out when the tension breaks unexpectedly. Even those who weren't on Crockett's side couldn't deny the elegance of the blow. Bondi shifted uncomfortably, her shoulders stiffening as if bracing against an invisible weight. She had wanted noise, a shouting match, something she could dominate. Instead, Crockett gave her precision, and precision can wound deeper than fury. Crockett leaned back slightly, not retreating but claiming her space. She didn't rush to fill the silence, she let it expand, let Bondi's faltering confidence become visible to everyone watching. The more Crockett stayed composed, the more Bondi's earlier dominance dissolved into something smaller, more brittle. The contrast was devastating. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long, but it was devastating. That was the unspoken narration echoing through every viewer's mind as the moment replayed in their heads. Crockett's calm had turned into a weapon sharper than any raised voice. Bondi had swung wildly, only to be undone by a whisper of composure. And yet, as powerful as it was in that room, what happened next would dwarf the live exchange. Because the real explosion didn't happen in that chamber, it happened online. The clip didn't just stay in that chamber. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Twitter, or X as some now called it, lit up like a fuse had been set. Hashtags exploded across timelines. #CalmWins, #Crockett clapback, #stop talking. Each replayed video carried the same caption: "This is how you handle arrogance." Memes appeared almost instantly. Screenshots of Crockett's unshaken face contrasted with Bondi mid-yell, captions dripping with irony. TikToks remixed the moment with music drops, slow-motion edits, even side-by-side reactions of viewers losing their minds in real time. The silence that followed Crockett's words became as iconic as the reply itself, a digital chorus of gasps and applause echoing across millions of screens. Threads dissected the strategy behind her calm. Commentators broke down body language frame by frame, Bondi leaning forward, Crockett leaning back. One journalist wrote, "She didn't just win the exchange, she redefined how to win in a world addicted to noise." Celebrities joined the chorus. Blue-check accounts praised her composure, activists amplified the clip. Even comedians weighed in, turning Bondi's "stop talking" into punchlines that spread further than any official statement could. Ordinary people flooded the replies, sharing their own stories of being interrupted, dismissed, or silenced, and how Crockett's restraint felt like a victory for them too. The moment transcended politics. It became cultural shorthand for dignity triumphing over arrogance, for calm dismantling chaos. Crockett's reply wasn't just a line anymore. It was a symbol, a rallying cry that quiet strength could carry farther than any shout. And yet, beyond the memes, beyond the hashtags, beyond the laughter and the validation, something deeper was unfolding. Whoa. When the noise died down and the clip settled into history's reel of viral moments, Crockett reframed the exchange with quiet clarity. She reminded her supporters and her critics alike that what had happened wasn't just about her versus Pam Bondi. It was about something larger. Dignity versus arrogance, restraint versus aggression, the refusal to be silenced against the hunger to silence. Her calm was not an accident. It was intention, honed through years of being spoken over, dismissed, underestimated. By refusing to yell back, she amplified something far greater than her own voice. She amplified the principle that every person deserves to be heard without having to shout for the right. And for the millions watching, it wasn't just politics anymore, it was personal. Viewers saw their own struggles mirrored in her composure, the workplace meeting where they were cut off, the classroom where their words were ignored, the dinner table where their truth was brushed aside. Crockett's reply wasn't only hers, it belonged to everyone who had ever been told to quiet down. She turned calm into resistance, she turned composure into strength. And doing so, she flipped the script on what power looks like. Not the loudest voice, not the sharpest interruption, but the steady conviction that refuses to bend. That's why the moment resonated so deeply, far beyond the headlines and trending tags. It was more than a clash of personalities, it was a lesson, a reminder, and a promise all at once. And that's why this moment will be remembered long after the headlines fade. Pam Bondi yelled, "Stop talking!" But Jasmine Crockett's calm reply became the moment that millions couldn't stop replaying. The yell was loud, but it was the quiet answer that carried across the country. The clip told its own story, arrogance trying to silence and dignity refusing to bow. And in that single exchange, America witnessed a truth too powerful to ignore. Picture the fade out, Bondi stiff in her chair, unsettled, her attempts at control slipping away. Crockett steady and unshaken, gathering her notes, walking out with the same composure she brought into the room. No raised voice, no rattled expression, only the assurance that she had made her point without ever needing to match the chaos. That image lingers because it speaks to something bigger than politics. It reminds us that justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers, and in the whisper lies the strength to change everything. It shows us that Americanness, the best version of it, is not about shouting someone down, but about lifting truth up. If this moment inspired you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe, share this story, and let the world know dignity wins over arrogance. Because when calm stands tall against noise, when justice answers hate with resolve, it's not just a viral clip, it's a movement. It's a reflection of who we are and who we can be. And that is the legacy of Jasmine Crockett's calm reply, a reminder that unity, composure, and truth are louder than any yell could ever be.